Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the next installment in my Gardening for Beginners series. My name is Janie. I'm a self-taught home gardener in Northern California, Zone 9B. And this is my Gardening for Beginners series where every week I do a deep dive into a different gardening topic so that new gardeners will be ready to go once the gardening season is in full swing. Today, we're talking all about frost dates. First frost dates, last frost dates, everything you need to know about it. It's a deceptively simple concept that you might just kind of fly by and say, oh, my first frost date is this, or my last frost date is this. But you really need to understand what we're talking about when we talk about frost dates when you become a gardener. Frost dates are important to understand so you know when you can schedule your gardening activities, like sowing seeds or planting perennials in the fall. If you sow your seeds too early, say you sow them inside and they're ready to be planted out and it hasn't hit your last frost date yet, if you plant those seeds out into your yard, you're putting those seeds at risk of getting harmed by frost, just depending on the chance of there being frost in your area. Same thing for if you're planning to plant perennials at the end of the season in the fall, which is a really great time to plant perennials. If you plant them too late and too close to your first frost date, you might damage those new plants by planting them too soon, and they're going to get cold and cold damage and everything like that. So it's really important to understand. Let's get into it. Okay, so first off, how to find your frost date. Frost dates are divided up by zip code. So the easiest way to find your frost date, other than asking your neighbors or something like that, is to Google how to find your frost date by zip code. And a screen should pop up. There's a bunch of different websites. Pick one of them and type in your zip code. And then that should give you a table and it should tell you two dates, the date of your last frost date and the date of your first frost date. So I think a really important thing for new gardeners to remember about these dates that you get in this table when you put in your zip code is that these are estimates. These are not exact. Of course, we can't control the weather and we don't know when there's going to be frost. The numbers that you usually get popping up when you put in your zip code are about 30% chances. So basically, if I put in my zip code and I get my last frost date is March 1st, that's a 70% chance that I will not have a frost on March 1st or later, but there is still a 30% chance that I will have a frost later than that. So if I am putting all this hard work into sowing my seeds and getting some baby seedlings and then I plant them out there on March 1st, I have to remember in the back of my mind that there is still a 30% chance that there's going to be a frost. And I have to be okay with that if I choose to plant them on my last frost date. So just checking the history of my area, the latest that we've had frost is actually in early April. So that is over a month past our projected last frost date. So it's just something that you just need to be aware of. It's an estimate, it's a chance, it's just something that us gardeners need to know what we're doing when we put our seedlings in. So a good story to kind of explain frost date to you guys is last year I ended up having to have surgery on my foot, and the surgery was scheduled for right around the first week of March, right when I was planning to plant all my little seedlings into my cut flower garden, and I was devastated at the timing. So I made the decision to plant them in mid-February, 2 weeks before my last frost date, and I wanted to take that risk because I knew I wasn't going to be able to get out there in the garden for about 6 weeks after my surgery. So it was a chance I was willing to take. I was checking the weather report, the 10-day forecast as much as I could to see that if I was, just wasting my time, but it ended up working out for me. So I planted my seedlings mid-February last year. We did not get a frost after that time, and so it worked out for me. But there could have been a frost, mid-March, and I would have just had to deal with that. So now that you've looked up your first and last frost date for your zip code, what can you do with this information? I think the most important thing you can do with this information is to know when to start your seedlings, to sow your seeds if you're planning to do that. So if you look on the back of a seed packet, it will tell you, it will say, sow the seeds 6 to 8 weeks before last frost. And then you'll know when your last frost is and when they want you to put the seeds into the seed starting mix and get it germinating. So timing is really important in gardening, and you'll see in my future videos I'll go over how I divide up my year into weeks. I number my weeks, and I know when my last frost date week is, and I know 8 weeks before that when I'm going to start all my seedlings. So knowing your last frost in the spring is really important, because then that will tell you when is a good time to start your seeds. You want to make sure you don't start your seeds too early, because then they'll get too big for your seed starter pots, your seed trays. They'll get root bound and they'll get really unhappy. So you don't want to keep them indoors or wherever you're starting your seeds for too long. And then you also don't want to start them too late, so that you kind of are behind the 8 ball and late in your schedule for getting your plants in the ground. Knowing the date of your last frost is a really good bit of information to know when all the annuals are going to start coming out in your garden centers. So like I said, March 1st is the date of our last frost in my area, and I know I'm not even going to go to the garden centers until that date, because they're not going to be carrying the annuals that are really tender to frost and might be killed even when they're in the garden center because of a frost in our area. So the date of your last frost is kind of the go for our gardening season wherever you guys live. I live in zone 9B, so I have a pretty long gardening season. It's 200 something days. So, you know, the higher your zone you're in, the earlier your last frost date is going to be, and the earlier your garden centers are going to start carrying the annuals and the tender perennials and everything that has to wait for warmer weather before we start planting them out. So as new gardeners, I truly believe in doing just a little bit every week so that it doesn't get too overwhelming. Knowing the date of your last frost, you can kind of, you know, count back and plan up until that day. So, you know, you can get all your weeding done 4 weeks before. You can buy all your mulch 3 weeks before. You know, you can prep your beds 2 weeks before. And then when that time comes, when you go to the store to buy your annuals, you're ready to go and you have everything ready. So changing gears a little bit to talk about your first frost date, which is usually in the fall or winter, depending on where you live. For me, it's right around Thanksgiving, about November 25th. And that's a really important date as well to know, because you usually want to get most of your gardening, most of your transplanting, most of your planting or pruning done 6 to 8 weeks before that date. So if I was to, you know, get a new plant, get a new perennial in the ground, I would want to make sure that I did it sometime mid-October, so that plant had enough time to settle into its spot, to root in a little bit, and to get used to our climate before there's a chance of a hard frost. So speaking of hard frost, there are different levels of frost. That's something that's important to understand as well. So I have the numbers here, so I'm going to look down here for a little bit. There's such thing as a light freeze, a moderate freeze, and a severe freeze or a deep freeze. And a light freeze is anywhere from 29 to 32 degrees, and that will kill tender plants like annuals or things that are kind of borderline in your zone. A moderate freeze is 25 to 28 degrees, and that's going to be pretty harsh to most of your vegetation. It's going to kill quite a lot of things that are frost tender. And then finally, there's a severe freeze, which is anything 24 degrees and below. You'll get heavy damage to most garden plants, is what it says. So that's something that you need to think about. You could, you know, your temperatures could get down to about 32 degrees, but it might just be a light frost, and something might be fine. Something that's closer to a house or something that's protected from the foliage of another plant might be okay, and you might be able to risk it a little bit. But if you get colder than that, you know, the colder you get, the riskier you get, and the more precautions that you have to take. Either you don't plant that plant, or you put, you know, a protective covering like a sheet or harvest guard or something like that over the plant. So talking about light, moderate, and severe freezes, or another way people say it is a light frost and a deep frost. That's something that you kind of need to know as well. In my area, we really don't get severe freezes. We rarely go below mid-20s or anything like that. So a lot of the plants that will die from that, we don't have that issue because it doesn't go down that low. Now, that of course is just an estimate. There's been times that we've gotten down to the teens, but it's been years, and that's a chance that most people in my area are willing to take. So you just kind of have to get to know your climate. You have to know what the temperature norms are. That's kind of what your zone is going to tell you, and then how often you get into frost. In my area, zone 9B, we have a lot of citrus trees, like lemon trees and mandarin trees and things like that. And those type of trees, they're okay in a light frost, but once you get down to a moderate or a deep frost, they don't do well, and they could lose all their leaves from something like that and possibly lose their fruit set for the next year. So when there's a frost, it's kind of funny. You can kind of just drive down a neighborhood and you can see everybody has a blanket or burlap or, like I said, harvest guard over their citrus trees, and so you kind of know, oh, did I cover my lemon tree? There must be a frost coming. So that's one way to be alert and aware of when a frost is coming. Another way is to sign up for a notification. You can just Google frost alerts, and then there's a way that you can put your zip code in and your email address in, and it'll send you alerts. On my iPhone, if you look at the weather app, it will tell you when there's a frost warning for the area. So that's really helpful as well. The final thing that I want to tell you about frosts is it's not purely dependent on the temperature. So you can't just look at your weather app and say, oh, it's going to be 30 degrees. That means that there's going to be frost today. Last week we had temperatures as low as 29, but there was actually no frost because there wasn't a lot of moisture in the lower level of atmosphere. Whereas we did have a light frost where the temperature only got to 31, and we woke up and there was frost on all the cars and frost on the roofs and everything like that. So it's pretty complicated. I don't totally understand all of it, but the important thing for you guys to know is it's not purely temperature dependent. There's a lot of other factors, including the wind and the moisture in the air, that go into whether or not there's going to be a frost. So the easiest way for you guys to prepare yourselves for frost is to know when your frost dates are, when you're more likely to have frost, and then also have some type of notification system like on your weather app or something like that, and that will give you a good warning of whether there's going to be a light frost or a hard frost that night, and so then you can go out and take care of your plants accordingly. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Frost dates, it's kind of a dry topic, but I think it's something that's really important, and I can remember just being completely confused when I started out gardening. I remember asking quite a few of my neighbors, hey, when do you plant your tomatoes out in the spring? Just because I just didn't understand what all those numbers meant when I looked it up. So I think the important things to remember are know your frost date from your zip code, look it up online, know what that means, know that it's just an estimate and you're taking a chance if you plant out right on your frost date, and then know that your frost date will help you schedule your gardening year, and it'll help you pick different plants and know whether they're just gonna not survive the cold that you have over the winter during your frost season, or if you can do a little bit of protection like we do in our area for citrus trees, that they might do well. So please let me know if you guys have any questions in the comments section down below. Please consider subscribing. It would really help me out if you enjoy these videos. Like I said, I'm going to be posting a new video in my Gardening for Beginners series every Monday until the beginning of gardening season. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope to see you in another video very soon.